Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Hi, everybody. I see a chat message. I want to make sure everybody can hear us. Are we okay?
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so it's a great pleasure today to welcome our speaker, our SkAI Colloquium speaker, Alyssa Goodman. She's a well-known pioneer and leader at the working at the intersection of astronomy, AI, and visualization. And it's really a thrill to be able to welcome her. She's also an old friend of mine. So she's the Robert Wheeler Wilson Professor of Applied Astronomy at Harvard and also a research associate at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory. And she got her undergraduate degree in physics at MIT, and then she took a long travel to Harvard and got her PhD in physics at Harvard. And then did you ever leave Cambridge?
I was a postdoc in Berkeley for 3 years.
Oh, wow. You went across to Berkeley for 6 years. Okay. And she's been at Harvard since being a junior faculty and till now. Now she's widely recognized for her pioneering work in interstellar medium and how gas and stars form and evolve in galaxies, in close connection with data visualization, and also an advocate for open science, open source software, and open science tools, and also for public communication. She's really a great person to have as a SkAI Colloquium speaker. In astrophysics, as I said, her work is connected to interstellar medium, the structure, and gas and star formation. And so we'll give a talk I want to mention on that topic in SkAI for those who are connected to SkAI on Monday. But today we're going to hear more about data visualization and the role of AI in that area. She's the founder of major projects like Worldwide Telescope that some of you may know, and I'm not sure if it's going to be mentioned today. I thought so, no. She's saying no. But also a data visualization tool, a major collection of tools called GLUE. And over her career, she's been recognized by numerous awards, from Sloan to Career, a young investigator back then, and also has been honored with a large number of named lectureships, and also has served our community in many roles, and most recently as a member of the Committee for Astronomy and Astrophysics of the Academy. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Alyssa. Thank you, and take it away.
Thanks, Vicky. Thank you. So, you know what I forgot to do is make sure I was on the internet. Thank you, and Jerome. Anyway, so let me share my screen instead of showing you pictures of all of you. And we'll get a slideshow in a second. I just would love to see who's here. Ooh, let's see. Hello, Claude Andre. Okay. I know some of these people, because normally what I would do before starting is ask what people's background is, but I think I'm gonna have to just decide that the room is a representative sample.
It's a mix of astronomers and AI experts.
Right, so I have to say okay to the recording. There's a lot of overhead involved with the Zoom. Okay, there we go. All right, so this is not what I'm going to talk about. I just thought, since Vicky was saying I do all this work on the interstellar medium and the Milky Way and visualization, I should just sort of say, this is what I mostly do, okay? But I realized a few years ago that I really do have an interest in AI, and that it kind of goes back a long time. And so for those of you who are hoping to have a really super technical talk today, kind of about the how, this is more about the why. Okay, and so there'll be 5 or so different examples and more that I could talk about. They mostly won't have to do with this, but we'll come back to this at the end. And so instead, I'm going to show you this pretty and weird picture that we will get back to later. That for those of you, raise your hand if you do have a background in astronomy. Oh, wow, lots of you. Okay, so I'm sure that looks just like a Hertzsprung-Russell diagram. No, okay, so I have kind of a plan where I'll show you kind of a selection of stuff that's done in the last many years. And then where I think we need to go next. And so I did have to put an asterisk because this is AI, and so today has to have like the month and the year. Okay? Maybe I should have said April 4th, 2025, because I'm gonna show you some examples later, where in a matter of days, okay, the last 12 days, okay, things have changed, okay? So this is the abstract that I typed late at night when you guys asked me for an abstract. And I'm like, what did I say I was gonna say? And so I highlighted these 5 things that I promised to talk about. So one was data set linking, automated versions of that within Glue and something called live environments. I'll explain that in a few minutes. Reading Time Machine, which is a project that I do with Jill Naiman, who I'm sure some of you know from UIUC, but she is temporarily unavailable. She'll be back to us, but I'll show you some of what she's doing. 3D selection, that probably doesn't mean anything to those of you who don't do visualization. I'll explain what that is, but I'll just say that it's like a 15-year quest of mine. And we finally solved it with an Apple Vision Pro, which, by the way, no, I do not think everybody wants to walk around wearing an Apple Vision Pro. We'll get to that later. And then this infographics thing is what I really want to talk about at the end, which is why it was on the first slide, because it's a challenge that AI has not been, okay, like totally not been. Okay, one of my friends is Fernanda Viegas. Some of you probably know her. She's at Harvard now. She used to be at Google, and she ran one of the AI programs at Google. And when the infographics problem that I'm going to show you was so bad, I thought I must be doing something wrong. And so my certificate of approval is that Fernanda says, no, this is unsolved. So if one of you tells me it's solved, I'm going to be really happy when I do. But otherwise, we're going to have an interesting discussion later. And then the one that's evolving day by day is writing code for visualization. I have a very simple live example that we can look at later. Okay, so like I said, my plan based on all this is at the end, I'd like to have a discussion about infographics. And then if we have time, I'd like to go back to that, what I really do in astronomy, and say kind of, what do you think AI can do with the collection of open data and open tools that we're putting together. But I know this is gonna be a little bit small for those of you who are not on Zoom, so I'm just gonna tell you what all this is. Most of you probably don't know, but the American Astronomical Society in 2015 adopted a whole raft of recommendations about how to update their publications. And so Josh Peak and I was younger then, so we were the young people who were assigned to kind of be on this secret committee that David Helfand created to figure out what those technologies should be. And we wrote a long, task force report on it, but we also made this fake paper, okay, called the Paper of the Future, which you can still play with online. I'm just gonna move this Zoom thing out of the way of the titles. But it was from 10 years ago, okay? So the future this is 10 years ago that I'm talking about, okay? But what we said in that paper was that what new technologies would allow you to do would be to connect data, language, and pictures. And again, I'll get back to that, what that means in a second. But just in terms of what the technologies were that were new-ish then, and then I'm happy to say were all endorsed in this report and are all used now, okay? So the first one, well, let's go with the keyboard.
Actually, the keyboard would help because the Zoom people can only see. the
No,
key-
they can see this because it's a
Oh,
software pointer. That's
well,
why I was
there,
using
there,
it.
my knowledge.
But
Okay,
actually.
thank you.
Oh, I see what happened. It thinks I'm trying to annotate the screen. Okay, that was a Zoom thing. Apparently this and Zoom are not good combo, so let's go with this. Okay, so anyway, so like I said, what we were talking about was using these technologies to connect language, data, and pictures, both for communication, but also for understanding, for cognition, okay? So to do that, we were advocating that data be published with the papers, that there were online collaborative authoring tools that should be used and approved, like Overleaf, which everybody uses now. This paper was made using something called Authoria, which is like Overleaf. It has in it, like all of these things are demonstrated in the paper, executable Python code. It has some worldwide telescope stuff where you can jump out from an image to seeing where that image goes on the sky. It has references to interactive 3D figures and also figures where you can make selections in one panel of a figure and see that go across to the other one. And it even mentions an early form of augmented reality, which I'll just brag. My team a few years ago was the first to put an augmented reality figure in the AAS journals. And so I'm actually not gonna show that to you today, but come Monday to Sierra, I'll show you. But anyway, all right, so what about AI and how does it have to do with this picture, which you can now see more clearly because it's larger, okay? So in the olden days, like if you go look at the AppJ of, 1975, you'll see that first of all, there wasn't a lot of data. There were small tables and you couldn't go get the large amount of data that was behind anything in an article. So today that's different, right? Although it's often separate, there are these like online tables and you have to go download them from a different service. What we were advocating then is no, make it so you can actually play with the data in the paper, okay? And so language here refers to either equations or words, okay? So the things that you would type. And then pictures, so any kind of figure or illustration. And so those things were all separate. They were so separate that images in the journals were glossy photographs pasted in at the back. They weren't even with the article, never mind not in the text. Okay? So obviously, in the world we live in now, these things can all be integrated. And I think you could argue that it's better for understanding what's going on and communicating if you do that. But what I wanted to do is sort of use this framework to say, where did these 5 projects that I promised to talk about kind of fit? And one is this, how many of you know that John Tukey pioneered something called exploratory data analysis? Vicky, gold star. Anyway, so what that means is, well, I'll show you in a few minutes when I show you Glue, but it's basically the idea that if you have multiple displays of your data open, you want to be able to interact with one and whatever you do to that one should update live in the other ones. And there's all sorts of cognitive studies about how you learn things from that. And many of you probably do know that John Tukey was a great statistician. And his whole idea was that you do that in order to then inspire what you want to calculate later. And that you want to go back and forth from the kind of calculation or running code in our case to kind of what we would think of as GUI or interactive visualization. So anyway, we have been working on that for a long time, but part of what we do is make it easier for people to do that where they don't have to build a formal database or one big data file. So Glue, which you'll hear about in a few minutes, not only glues together plots like that, and like Vicky mentioned, it's actually a collection of a lot of tools talk to each other, but the thing that's interesting is it actually also glues together data sets. So I'll show you how AI can be used to make that easier. The code for visualization is pretty obvious what that is. We'll get back to that in a minute. 3D selection, I'll keep leaving you in the dark, okay? But this reading time machine has to do with using information that's in journal articles as data and metadata in ways that you couldn't before. So I'll show you what that is. And the infographics is mostly about communication and having kind of mental models that you want to put in a picture. And let's just say that the mental model of DALL-E or ChatGPT or any of the other ones is pretty amusing at the moment. Like it doesn't exist. Okay. So anyway, so chronologically, these things kind of fall on a timeline, which is extraordinarily nonlinear. Okay, this is AI, right? So here's 2012, and then these years just get closer and closer together. I mean, farther and farther apart, so that I can fit what I want to fit in here. Okay, so let's just take those things away and say, how does this go into sort of context of the rest of what's going on in my work? Okay, so my first successful foray into machine learning was done thanks to a graduate student named Chris Beaumont, who's had an interesting career since. He was the original developer for Glue. He went to a biotech startup. We knew he was going to do this. Like this was the plan. And then he went to Netflix, and then he went to Google, and he currently works at OpenAI. Okay, but when he was a young graduate student, he thought about using machine learning on crowdsourced data from Zooniverse, and I'll show you that example in a couple minutes. Before that, we also had kind of wishful thinking aspirations for AI to read figure captions and labels on plots and on images in journals, okay? That was not possible in 2012 when we said it should be possible soon. It's very possible now, and that's what that reading time machine project is about. So I'll show you that in a minute, but that took until about 2022. Okay, so that we were a little optimistic, took 10 years. Anyway, so the paper of the future that I told you was 2015, and then Glue itself was launched in about 2012, and then there's another version of Glue that runs in a browser that's called Bluepiter. Again, that's not really, by the way, my collaborator on that is Fernando Perez, and the whole Jupyter team has approved Glupiter, so sorry. But actually, it now runs in something called Solara, which again, I'm not gonna talk about today very much, but, Solara is terrific, but Glue Solara is what that code repo is called, and it's really just not as good as Glupiter. Anyway, so then, around 2020, that's when things started getting interesting in terms of considering AI and what was I doing. So this, I'm actually not gonna have time to talk about this prediction project, which actually has a lot to do with teaching undergraduates, kind of where AI fits into the human version of prediction in their lives. And so you can ask me at the end, but that I'll just tell you what this big gray arrow shows, that you skip things like rules and theories and explanations in AI, and you go straight from data to predictions, which you all know, okay? But there's an interesting kind of philosophy behind that we could discuss later. Cosmic Data Stories is a project, again, that I'll only talk about on Monday, that has to do with a big grant from NASA to teach data science using astronomy and earth science examples. And one of the things we're gonna do next is an AI-driven example. So the only reason I left it there is in case anybody's interested in talking about that this afternoon. Okay, so finally, 3D selection got interesting during the pandemic of all things. So I also wasn't gonna show you this, but since I have one in my bag, I'll show you later. During the pandemic, I got to, like all of us, spend a lot of time alone with the internet. And so I bought every possible tool I could think of that cost less than $2,000. This one costs $20, to interact with data in a three-dimensional sense. Okay, so this thing is an augmented reality target cube. And this is a tiny picture of my cat using said cube. I will just leave that there as a tantalizing thing for later. But let's just say that what we were trying to do is imagine, okay, and actually I could do the whole demo right now, but I don't think I should mess up Zoom. But anyway, I could turn this into anything I want. So I could turn this into the galaxy, okay? Yeah, really, it's true. I'll show you a video later if you want, or I'll do it for you. But actually, I have a cool TNG simulated galaxy for this afternoon if you want. But anyway, so I could turn this into a galaxy, and then if I wanted to go and grab, like say there's some satellite of this galaxy, and I want to actually pick out just that galaxy in 3D, that's what 3D selection is. So algorithmically in messy, noisy data, that's often very hard. Okay, so what you want is for some algorithm to guess, and then you want to use your actual hands to like sculpt what you want. So that's the quest we've been on, and that's why there's this. But that got better, like I said, when we had an Apple Vision Pro. And so again, I'm very proud to say that my collaborators and I are the first people to actually get the hand tracking good enough that you can draw shapes with the Apple Vision Pro. And it's not too AI informed yet, so it's a big opportunity there if somebody wants to work on it. I was also involved through strange channels with what is now called Universe TBD and Astrolama, which are these LLMs for astronomy literature. I'm actually not going to talk about that today because my involvement is pretty minimal. And then we're also making something called the Path to AI, which you might be really interested in, that has to do with an educational product that we made as part of this prediction project. Hopefully have a little bit of time to talk about at the end, but it basically shows the evolution graphically as an infographic made by humans, okay, of AI that has to do with images and words and code, and sort of who all the pioneers were and how the developments built on each other and kind of leaves room for what happens in the future. And the reason there's a logo there, that's the weird logo of MIT Press, that if you don't recognize it, it's hard to find. But as part of the prediction project, we're making 5 of these paths. There's already a path to Newton and a path to Darwin. There's also a path to Einstein in the works, a path to modern genetics, and this path to AI. And there'll be a series of 5 little books that come with these huge posters. I'm sorry, I didn't bring you a poster. I'll send you a poster. And online infographics, which again, please ask me later and I'll show you. So as for infographics, that thing I showed you at the beginning, we will get back to at the end. It does not look like the HR diagram, but Dolly thinks it does. Okay, and the prediction project, I hope I have time, but it also inspires the example I'm going to give you of code for visualization. So just for fun to show you what this machine learning project was in 2014, there's something called the Milky Way project, where people were asked to mark outlines of cavities in 2D images of the interstellar medium. Many people at Adler were involved in that project. Anyway, this just shows you the outcome of this. Chris, by the way, who loves to name things, he named glue. He also named this brute because, champagne has bubbles. So it's a brute force algorithm that relies on random forests. But anyway, this is just showing you, the reason I wanted to put a slide in here is to show you that we always have to remember, again, I'm talking to experts, so I think you know, that human expertise is not always exactly mimicked by AI. So this would be the same, this project, if you did it now using the same tools. And what you see here, over here, is just a little section of, there's actually 6,000 of these bubbles that are studied in this thing. But it gives probability, reality probabilities, for each thing that it finds. And what is that based on? It's based on comparing, humans and, the machine learning output for a subsample of the bubbles. And just this graph here shows you everything that's blue, okay? All the people and the code agree are bubbles, okay? But there's like 40 something in this sample, and there's only whatever 4 that everybody agrees. There's a bunch more here that everybody agrees are not a bubble, okay? But this mixture in the middle is, you can't do it perfectly, okay? And so in other words, what we could do is assign the sort of realistic or reality probabilities of everything that the AI found, which does make it better than the humans, because the humans, it's very hard to know how confident to be. So anyway, that was 10 years ago, and I thought, okay, that was fun. But then things got really a lot more interesting, and so this ADS All-SkAI survey project had many parts, and I again don't have time to talk about them, but just for fun, let's see, let's just go out of this for a minute, because I keep promising you things and then not showing them to you, so hang on. Let me just show you one thing, okay? So if I go to that paper of the future. Okay, the future of paper, not here. Okay. Paper of the future. This is like super dangerous. I have not clicked this link in a long time. So we're gonna see if this actually works. Oh, by the way, what this is, just to show you what exploratory data analysis is, you see how if I select stuff in one plot, it goes in the other plot, change it. Okay, that's not what I want to show you. Here's what I want to show you. So here's an image from Barnard from like 1918 or something. Okay, and then if I click there, it'll actually open this 4-way telescope program that Vicky mentioned and put that on SkAI exactly where it goes. Okay, so if I go back and forth, you can see that is in fact where it goes. If I ask like, what is this? It'll tell me what it is. And by the way, all of this has been possible since like 2010, okay, which is why I wasn't going to talk about this today. But imagine, now to go back to the slides, imagine that you had figures in journals, okay, that were solvable like that. So that's solved with something called astrometry.net. If you don't know what that is, it's really cool. Thank you, David Hogg, Dustin Lang, and a bunch of other people. But anyway, if you can't solve the images that way, well, you could read the figure captions and you could read the labels, okay? And so we thought, oh, we could get AI to do that. No, okay, so this is like still a research project, and I'll show you 2 papers that came out of it in a few minutes. But what we did do is we got humans to do that part of the project, again, as a Zooniverse project. And then we used the human segmentation essentially of the images in the PDF as a way to have a training set. And so these are the 2 papers that are important that came out of it. So one is actually how well can you get these captions, and I refer you to the paper if you want to know how that came out. But the other one, I just want to point out that what we're trying to do, right, this is the same paper actually, and you can see here that if you look at one of the older algorithms, you can't tell the difference between the caption and the zone of the figure. So I mean, this doesn't look that interesting, okay? But the outcome is very important because it means you can read all old journals and figure out what's in the figures. So I'd actually love to try this with just like straight up ChatGPT right now and see if it could do, because it keeps getting better every day. So, but anyway, this was a big project that Jill did, comparing a lot of different OCR and image processing techniques, which you can see over here. And like I said, you can go look at the paper. But just for fun, I also took this paper, which used that same training data, this time from the archive, and I asked ChatGPT to summarize the paper. It's pretty good. And then it makes this graphic over here, like an ASCII, old school ASCII graphic that says, you know, archive latex sources, parse and mark, compile to PDF, blah, blah, blah. It's all fine. If you then ask it to make that graphic as a visual, it is the worst thing you've ever saw. But we don't have time, okay? So just believe me, and I will put all these slides online and you can learn about this. And so with no offense to Jill, that is the least snazzy thing I'm gonna talk about today. So I put it first, so I don't want to disappoint you. Okay? So what about the linking? Okay, so again, since you don't necessarily know that much about what glue is for, here's kind of a one slide summary, and then I have like a video that I can scrub through really fast. But imagine that you have 3D data and you have some 2D images or 2D data, and then you have some kind of statistical plots, and then whatever your favorite kind of abstraction, like a tree diagram or a network diagram or something like that. The whole idea that John Tukey had, which was barely possible with custom hardware in the 1970s, and then became actually possible with a mouse in 1985. So the Mac came out in 1984, but the first actual commercial program to do any of this was called Data Desk. And the reason it was Mac only is because most of you are too young to know this, but the first computer that actually had a mouse, okay, was a Mac, and no other computers did. Okay, so that's why there's this weird Mac only program called Data Desk that almost no one knew about, but luckily I was a Mac fan, so I knew about it. Anyway, so what it could do is exactly what you see here. But for 3D data, what it could do was, like, if you had a point cloud, you could kind of like make a lasso, and then you could rotate it a little and make another lasso, but it's very hard to do that selection in 3D. Okay, so that's why that's going to become important later. But in terms of what's the data set linking, this is a video that you can find online. And I left it here so that I could scrub through it really fast, because I'm just giving you like the fastest introduction to glue ever. I already told you that it has 3 different meanings, gluing together the graphs and the data sets and the tools, but the data sets can be essentially anything. And then this is the part that's important. So I'll show this to you again in a second. But the idea is you have all these different data sets, and whatever their shared attributes are, or whatever, oops, sorry. Okay. Sorry, I should have done that. I should have put the real slides in instead of trying to go so fast, but here, so in other words, I'll get back to that in a second. But the idea is then, once you glue all those data sets together, then you can have all these different data types, and whatever selection you make in one of them, just like you just saw in that Tukey summary, goes across all of them. And then you can have all these plugins, and you can run it in a browser, and this talk isn't about glue, so done talking about that. But the important part is you have all these different data sets. Some of them might be images, some of them might be 3D, some of them might be gigantic tables, some of them might be online, some of them might be on your computer, okay? And what you want is to say really simple things like right ascension in this table is called RA in this image, okay? But you can also say much more complicated things about clustering algorithms and stuff, but basically you're telling it how one data set relates to another data set. And then once you do that, you can actually analyze them all together, okay? But things like RA is right ascension, a human should not have to be doing that, right? So Martin Brettles, who is the terrific developer of Solera and many other things, has put on the website for live environments, I'll explain what that is in a second, a quick demonstration of an already working option for linking using AI. But we can get much fancier than what this does. And this is doing it, by the way, in a browser in Glue Solera. So what is live? Okay, just again, like advertisement for Monday, which I'm not really talking about. Okay, so live is something that Fernando Perez and I are trying to lead together, and the NSF was going to give us all kinds of money for it, but that's a different story. Anyway, it stands for Linkable Interactive Visualization and Exploration Environments, and it works for astronomy, biology, and GIS, and it basically puts together a bunch of visualization tools and other data analysis tools that you might have heard of, so that they all can kind of work in concert in a browser. And I refer you to that website if you want to know more, but that augmented reality page I just showed you was from there. Okay. So that's the data set linking. This gets more interesting as I go on. That's why I'm talking so fast. Okay, so that's the linking. But then the 3D selection. Okay, so let me show you what 2D selection looks like. You want me to like take my life in my hands and do live demo? Or you want me to show you this video? Video? Okay.
Sure.
What?
Your choice.
Oh, you can buy me airplanes. I believe in you.
Thanks. All right, well, this is showing you if you want to select something in 2D, okay? You just lasso something, it turns to a different color, and then in every other plot that's open, it would work. And so if I go here, I think I left it open, let's just play around. Right, so if I actually have blue open, just to show you what the challenge is with 3D selection, so here's the same data, it's different session. Oh, by the way, glue can save sessions, which means you get back to where you were, and then it can also write out the Python code for any of the plots, and you can go back and forth from a terminal or a notebook to the interactive stuff. But again, not really about glue today. So anyway, you can, and this is Worldwide Telescope, inside of glue running as a web tool. But the point here is if you look at this 3D plot and I wanted to make some selection in 3D, I still have to do the same thing. By the way, when you open this on a screen that you change the resolution of, it freaks out. But so I made a little selection there you didn't even see. So let me do it again. Okay, so if I do this, okay, what's gonna happen is that it'll go all the way through the cube. Okay, and that's probably not what I wanted, right? And so what you have to do then is you have to then use this Boolean logic up here. If I hover here, you can see it says add selection, set as intersection, set as exclusive, or remove from selection. And then I can go back here and I can start going, no, I don't want this piece, okay? But again, that's only gonna be in one projection. And I'm gonna have to keep doing this and doing this. So it's a huge pain, okay? And it's a pain in medical imaging, haha, pain medical, as well. So, so what you want is better ways to do that. And so I'm gonna show you a video that, like, as they say, only a mother could love, okay? Because it's not a very good video, but oh, look, here's a video of the merge cube. Okay, so this is this thing. This is a slide from a visualization talk about augmented reality. And this just happens to be a demonstration of what happens when you put some interstellar clouds on here and we do animation and cool stuff. But what I want to show you is what happens now in the Apple Vision Pro. So let me just go to this video. This is inside of Solara, but Solara is a part of live environments, which is the descendant of Glue, okay? And this is running in a browser in an Apple Vision Pro, okay? So the person making this video is showing you, like, here's a point cloud, and I'm going to adjust the color of the points, and now I'd like to make a scatter plot. That, oh, and by the way, this is using, for those of you who are web technology nerds, this is using an MDI interface so that you can move windows around within a browser window, which is very cool in my opinion, because you can make a big mess that I like to make on a desktop program. So anyway, so here somebody has selected something, they have these two windows open. You can't really tell whether it's in a desktop or in the Apple Vision Pro, but now here you go. So now there's that airplane data again. And then here's a 3D view of the data, okay? And then what they're gonna do is they're gonna make some kind of selection, okay? Not a very interesting selection, but you can now see the points, okay? And now, soon, you're gonna see the person's hands, because so far they're just using the cursor, okay? But you have to understand that this can all be done in a headset, or you can see through the headset to your actual computer. So fine, they're just showing that you can make selections in 3D as well, and those are at a different altitude. By the way, this is real data for airplanes flying over Boston. Sure, I have an FBI file. I have an antenna on the roof of the Center for Astrophysics. Okay, so here's the headset view on its own. And so the person's just looking around. It's a little nauseating, sorry. There's their hands, okay. And then here you can see now that the browser window is floating in the Apple Vision Pro. By the way, if you've never had one of these on, they're rock solid when it's on. It just looks shaky when you make a video like this. Okay, and then what you do is you stick your hands in there. And if you want to adjust that selection, you can draw, so you can, there's different gestures to make different kinds of surfaces. This is like below alpha, okay? This is like, it's barely working, but nobody did this before. So that's why I'm saying that only a mother could love, okay? We also did it on an HTC headset, but this is actually much better when you use it. So anyway, what we want is to use this. I'm going to stop nauseating you, but to use that in order to have smart AI-driven segmentation selections, and then use that not to draw the whole thing, but then to adjust what the AI gives you. Okay. And then you potentially feed that back in as sort of almost live training data, sort of human in the loop. So, because it's very hard to draw a whole complicated surface with your hands, but it doesn't even have to be AI. It could be some other algorithm gives you a shape, or a selection of points, and then you go, no, that one's an outlier, and you just do this with your hand, like, I don't want that anymore. Okay, and so anyway, there's a lot of opportunity in there in order to have real-time interaction between human and AI. Okay, so this one is very fun. Okay, so here is an example from my class. So I teach this class, and actually, let me show you a little bit about the class. I'm sorry, it's the Zoom is causing me not to be able to escape out of the presentation, so I'm sorry. So if I go down here, I'll just show you very quickly what I get to teach for fun these days. Okay, so we teach this class, which is, there's a giant project called the Prediction Project that's online at this predictionx.org site, okay? But it's a huge amount of educational material that has everything from, what goes on in terms of modern prediction and AI, but also goes back to Mesopotamian sheep and trail divination, okay? And so what it does is it's called the past and present of the future, because it traces kind of the history of how humans have predicted their future and why over time. And so anyway, one of the things that we do is try to give them a really good sense of what uncertainty means and explain that uncertainty is as hard to forecast as the forecast itself, okay? And so the example that we like to use most easily, no, that's a great video, but that's not what I was trying to show you. If you haven't seen that, that's amazing. That's this Earth 2 thing from NVIDIA and Jensen Huang, and they've now mixed an AI model with a physical model of wind around buildings. Ask me later and I'll show it to you. But anyway, what I wanted to show you is if you go to this actual, I can't see what I'm doing. Those of you in the room see that I keep getting in trouble because I have this menu that's in the way. Okay, so this is, it was an iPhone app when we first made it. As to why we made it, it's a funny story for later this afternoon. But this shows you the weather forecast for Boston, okay, with uncertainty. And so what's going on here is if I click on one of those and I say, what does this show me? It's showing you that if you look at the forecasts under similar conditions in the past and you compare it to what's forecast now, what's the distribution of differences for those conditions? And so what we were trying to do is for a homework assignment for the students, we were not trying to have them make that, okay? We were trying to have them understand uncertainty in weather forecasting as an example of something that you might want to visualize. Because what they do in the class is they keep a journal for the first 5 or 6 weeks of the class where they're predicting some phenomenon. And then we were asking them to make visualizations of whatever it was that they were predicting and try to estimate how uncertain their predictions were. And so they've seen this in the class, and so it's used as an example. So we thought, oh, all right, well, we'll make a simple visualization that has to do with that kind of data. And this is the assignment that they were given. And so I made, using ChatGPT, this really simple plot. And let me make it bigger for you, okay? And all it is it says, the blue line is the actual temperatures in January in Boston. And this is in centigrade, obviously, since 0 is here and it's Boston. And then the green would be a hypothetical forecast with some level of uncertainty, okay? And then down here, this is just showing you the difference between these two things. You have to understand, this is an undergraduate class for non-technical people, okay? And we were trying to say, you don't have to make anything very fancy in graphs. As a matter of fact, you can even use ChatGPT to make your graphs. But this is the thing I'm telling you has evolved over 12 days. Okay, so this is me using ChatGPT and then fighting with Python to try to get it, to get Matplotlib and other kind of labeling things, to put these labels where they're supposed to go. So if I go back, you see how there are these fancy labels that are kind of breaking the line a little bit and they're nicely placed so they're not in the way of too many things. And just to get it to try to put the labels anywhere near the lines rather than to make a key, it was hysterical. I could show you the whole chat, it's terrible, okay? And then this bottom plot, the other really funny thing was, we asked it to show the difference both in centigrade and in Fahrenheit. And it was just converting these numbers, like 4 degrees centigrade to Fahrenheit and putting that on the other side. So all of this was faked in a combination of Python and Keynote. by yours truly, and then put in the homework for the students. Oh, this is so easy. Look, see, you can make this with ChatGPT. But in fact, we did tell them in class, like, well, you might have to fix it a little bit. Okay, so that was, what's the date on there? That was March 25th. Okay, so probably we made that a couple days before then. Okay, and then 6 days later, just like 5 days ago, my teaching assistant sends me this chat, and this is the Slack over here, and these are the plots he was talking about. Okay, so this is March 31st, and it's like, no more Python, just does it for you right away. Here's the answer. So he says, create an image that contains two graphs, one a line graph that shows the month of January and days on the x-axis, and the y-axis is temperature. There should be two lines, one showing the real temperature and the other one showing a predicted forecast, so that the difference can be compared. The second graph should quantify the difference for each day if 1 degree, it gives an example, okay? So it does this, and it gets it right. And then he says, oh, and I'd like there to be labels, and I'd like it to be blue and green. And so, well, it's not as beautiful as the line breaking label that was manually done. It's pretty darn good, right? So that's 6 days later, okay? So then I, this morning, for fun, say, I wonder how it is, okay? And so I give it the same prompts, okay? And, but you know, I really want a slider. And then maybe I want to show the uncertainty, okay? And so now it's gotten to the point, oops, wait, I want to open it in ChatGPT. This is a different one. Let me get back to that one. I'm just gonna open it. Okay. And it's gotten to the point where I think it starts up here, but like what it offers me to add to it is astonishing. And again, if we have time this afternoon, I'll be happy to try some more of it. I'll show you a little bit of what I did after. But so here's the graph it makes originally. Here's, I don't know what I complained about. Oh yeah, put the labels there because it puts a legend first, you know, put the labels where they belong. And then it's like telling me to install Matplotlib. Like I got that, okay, fine. And then I run it in a notebook and it fails. The slider doesn't work, okay? And I'm like, that's not good, right? And so I tell it, I love this because it's here. It says, I wrote, yes, try Google Colab as the slider doesn't seem to work in Jupyter. And then it says, you're absolutely right. Standard sliders from matplotlib.widget don't work well in Jupyter Notebook and Colab. So I would like to know, I mean, this is amazing, all right? But if it knows that something doesn't work, why does it give you code that it knows doesn't work? So I'm sure next week that'll be gone, okay? But the part I wanted to show you is the part at the end. So anyway, so you do it in Google Colab and it works, all right? And that's what I showed you a minute ago on the slide. But then I say, where is it? Okay, all I say is, okay, that's great. Can we try a fancier visualization now? So I don't tell it what I want, I just say fancier, okay? And then it offers me all these things. Would you like an interactive Plotly dashboard? Would you like a 3D map? Would you like animation forecast evolution? Would you like stuff ready for augmented reality? And would you like to use stats models or profit for forecast modeling? Like, this is seriously over the top, okay, but amazing. So I didn't try any of it, except I thought, all right, I can't imagine what it wants to do in 3D. So let's say use Plotly and do something in 3D. And so it did do that. I can't remember whether I put it in the slides. Oh yeah, here it is, it's down here. It's this crazy thing that's kind of useless, okay? But it does work, okay? And it's amazing. I mean, this is 5 days after it started working. It can now add all of this stuff. So basically, I was at a talk for Harvard parents last weekend, and they were talking about careers for the kids. By the way, these were Harvard parents who donate money to Harvard while their kids are at Harvard. These are generous people, okay? So anyway, Logan McCarty, who teaches a course with Chris Stubbs, who some of you may know about AI, said that the career they should not go into anymore is straight up software development because of this. Okay, but I would argue that for now, you do have to know something about the software to actually get it to work, but hardly anything. Okay, so that was the last straightforward example, and now let's get to the fun one. Okay, this. Okay, so let me show you a little bit more of what this looks like after I just remind you that where we're going here is to talk about infographics and abstraction, and then maybe this last one about if we gave it all this data from Milky Way 3D.org, what would happen? Okay, so let's see. All right, isn't that beautiful? Okay. This is the response to being asked to make a straight up HR diagram. And so I thought I would show you the whole paper. So basically what happened, I'm going to show you some slides in a minute from a talk I gave back in June. It was a kind of summary of the last 5 years talk at an introduction to a workshop about mapping the Milky Way gas in 3D. And so I'll show you a little bit about that later so you can understand my second part of the question. But for now, I'll just tell you that Bruna Biz here is a junior undergraduate at Harvard who's a major in computer science and astrophysics. And I was telling her this story about going to this meeting and being asked to give this review talk of the last 5 years. And of course I was like, well, I'm not going to use slides made by ChatGPT, but I'm going to go see what ChatGPT thinks happened. And again, I'll brag a little bit. It regurgitated back to me all of my own and my collaborators' work. Like, well, here they did this and they discovered the Radcliffe wave and they did this and they did that. It's like, great, okay, but then I said, well, other people did some work too, can we please have some more? Because I think it actually does try to flatter you, like it knows it's me, right? So I think the fact that it's giving me my own work is because it thinks that's gonna make me happy. Sometimes that's true, but this particular time it was not, because what I was trying to do is get a more comprehensive view, right? So anyway, it eventually gets to the point where it's so good, and there's a lot of fighting, like it says IRAS, the satellite launched in 1993, but I, as someone who was aware of astronomy in 1983, said, no, that was 1983. So it made all kinds of mistakes like that, and it had fake citations, stuff that I'm sure you've all experienced. But you also probably all know that if you keep arguing with it, it gets better and better and better, just like an undergraduate intern. That's kind of my version of ChatGPT is an undergraduate intern to whom you have to be slightly less polite. And if you treat it like that, it's amazing, okay? So anyway, so I did that. I get to the point where I have these slides, I have this kind of outline, and I say, oh, if you were gonna make slides for this, what would they look like? And hopefully you know by now that I don't show slides with bulleted lists on them, okay? But it makes me these slides that are all bulleted lists. And I'm like, thanks, but no thanks. How about, what if you wanted to make a summary image of everything you just said? What would you? And it makes these things that unfortunately Harvard got a free ChatGPT super duper account since then. And so I don't have the account that I had. So you just have to believe me how bad they are. And I'm going to show you some from today that are just as bad. So it's fine. But anyway, so I'm telling this story to Bruna, the student who does computer science and astronomy. And she says, can I do my junior thesis about that? And so I said, okay, fine. So she first decides she's going to do the cosmic microwave background and that famous plot that shows, the beginning of the universe, and then you eventually get galaxies, and it's like this sort of funnily looking thing. Total fail. So we back up, we eventually get to the HR diagram. Like, this is the simplest, most famous diagram in astronomy. Like, try that. So this is her paper, which I'd be happy to share with you. This, by the way, she's just giving an example from another field. This is what happens if you ask it to make a supply and demand curve. Makes weird 3D graphics. I'm not kidding. You can try this yourself, okay? And then it's like, here's a good HR diagram, my friend ChatGPT, And then if you ask it, by the way, to describe this, does an insanely good job. Like, this is what it's for, and here's what Hertzsprung did, and here's what Russell did, and like all this extra information you didn't ask for, and it's all correct. Okay, so eventually she wound up putting its own description of the diagram back in to see what it could do. All still bad. She messed with like the size of the tokens and the number of tokens. She tried different algorithms. She tried everything and nothing worked. Okay, so this is all about, which diffusion models, et cetera, et cetera. But like, here are some of the diagrams. So it keeps thinking that like there's a stellar life cycle. And so her theory is that like it keeps trying to make cycles because it thinks it's about a stellar life cycle. And to me, they all look like steampunk. She even tried like make it look like Monet, and it still looks like steampunk. Anyway, so it's super bad. And then there's one, is it in here? She made one with Claude that eventually gave you code. And I think it's in here someplace. That's the one I just showed you. Yeah, okay, so these are really boring, okay? So this is Python code that comes out of either ChatGPT or Claude, but like, that's not an HR diagram, that's a graph, okay? That's not an infographic, so that's not helpful, and then there's some iteration about, right, and this is, whatever, she's explaining everything because it's an undergraduate thesis paper. But anyway, you're welcome to take a look at that, okay? But my question with the big thing that says abstraction there is, I think, you know, we all know that these large language models are not quote unquote thinking, right? Now they're supposedly reasoning. But if we keep going here, and I remind you that this is the stuff that I actually work on and the stuff that I was trying to ask them, to be summarized, back in that talk in June. Here's just a video giving you some sense of what I'll talk about on Monday, but there are all these different structures. This big red one is called the Radcliffe wave, the purple one is called the local bubble, the green one is called the Perseus torus shell. You can look at how that's all done in glue, and what that has to do with live and this project, but here, just so you know, okay, the big red thing, all of this is the last 5 years, and it all relies on 3D dust mapping, okay? And so again, for the astrophysicists in the room, it's kind of cool. There's like a 3 kiloparsec long stretch of the local arm that has a giant damp sine wave in it that we actually also now know is oscillating. Okay, and more stuff about the local bubble and the Pertau shock. But the point for the AI and drawing is this is how I make an illustration of how does 3D dust mapping work. And then I'm gonna show you what ChatGPT gives you in a second.
I want to stay back and see watch before leaving.
Oh, that's also true.
Somebody mute on Zoom.
Was somebody complaining about something? I don't speak whatever language that was, sorry, I can
No,
tell.
I think we
Okay.
just picked up.
So anyway,
somebody-
if you have a telescope, right, you have a telescope and you have some imaging plane, and then you have some stuff in interstellar space, this gray stuff, and you have a star whose light passes through that stuff. The light from the star is red, okay? And then this is a cartoon, so remember, we're gonna add things to it a little piece at a time, so that's like a sunset, okay? And then if you imagine that instead of billions of stars, which is how this is actually done, you have some small number of stars, and you also imagine that they're all the same color, which they're not, okay, but we'll leave that out of the story for now. Then depending on how much dust they go through, they get reddened by different amounts. They wind up different colors, okay? And then you probably can all imagine that if you had a huge amount of computing and smart graduate students and all kinds of clever algorithms, some of which now do involve AI, if you want to ask me, I can tell you, you can infer the distances of the stars and the three-dimensional distribution of dust, okay? But what happened is that Gaia came along and made that hugely easier, because one of the parameters that you'd otherwise have to solve for, the distances to the stars, is now known. So prior, strong prior, okay? And so that makes this easy, right? Easier, okay? And this is one of the earliest maps from pan-stars made by Greg Green and the Doug Finkbinder's group. And so we could start seeing the galaxy, the gas and galaxy in actual 3 dimensions, okay? Which, by the way, I never thought I would see in my whole life. This is ChatGPT's best attempt at explaining 3D dust mapping this morning, okay? Like, and I did it this morning, not just because that would be fun, but because I wanted to give you the actual, you know, last minute. Like, if the fact that it says interstellar dust, it's 3D, it has to say dust 3 times, I don't know. But anyway, this is actually better than in June. So in June, the writing was pretty unrecognizable, like the words looked like they were in Klingon. Okay, but like 3D dust mapping, the interstellar, what? I mean, you can really amuse yourself, okay? But the fact that the text is bad, like, I believe somebody's gonna fix that, okay? But are they gonna get to the point where, like, that diagram I just showed you, that animated diagram, I think is a pretty good explanation of how 3D dust mapping at least can work in principle. This is not just wrong, it's like horrendously complicated and useless, okay? So actually that reasoning about how you go from words to images, I think is actually unsolved, okay? And this is an article by a close friend and collaborator of mine, Felice Frankel, she doesn't like being called an artist, but her work certainly looks like art, okay? But what she does is she works with scientists who are using actual imaging, like photographic imaging usually, or sometimes involving microscopes. And she's worried that, you know, will her career continue to exist? And I think for now, given what I'm saying about how bad these things are at abstraction, the answer is probably yes, it will continue to exist. And just for fun, this is the AI generated version of what's supposed to be an image like this. So this is what the scientist made. This is what Felice made, which was a bit more beautiful and didn't focus on the bubbles that meant nothing. Just wanted to show that you could make different colors. with the fluorescing nanocrystals. And then, I don't know, because it said fluorescing nanocrystal or something, it decided that it had to show something that looked like crystals. Okay, and same thing, you keep fighting with it and it doesn't get better than that. Okay? So either it doesn't have ideas or it has its own ideas. I don't know. Okay, and so last but not least, this is just to remind you of what I wanted to talk about and where we are and then what I left out. So I left out most of that, okay? But the last thing is just because I saw somebody raising their hand when I said that 3D dust mapping didn't use AI, but now it does. And so for those of you who are interested in something really technical, you should look up this information field theory group from Torsten Ensslin at Max Planck and how the 3D dust maps have improved tremendously using AI. And the ones that I was showing you in the animations are in fact that. So anyway, this is what I wanted to talk about. And let me just tell you, the last thing is that milkyway3d.org, that project is, we're making a huge online database of all of this 3D dust mapping stuff, plus a bunch of other 3D catalogs. We're hooking it up to Glue, OpenSpace, Worldwide Telescope, Aladdin, all this software, so that people can mix and match humans and do whatever they want. But the question is, if you had all the relevant data about some astrophysical project, okay, 3D mapping of star formation, the local interstellar medium, and the visualization tools, which are accessible through code, could that be a project? Like, could that be like where you just unleash, kind of like where I said, why don't you make something fancier with the weather graphs? And then it offered me all these great things. And so I stand here, you know, April 4th, 2025, saying, I don't know, but like a year from now, I could be standing here saying, we took all the data from milkyway3d.org and we said, why don't you do something fancy with it, ChatGPT, and it solved for, I don't know, dark matter in the disk of the galaxy. Because I don't know what's coming next. But anyway, these are my two questions and I'm gonna stop there. Thanks.
We'll take questions. Actually, I'd like to first check and maybe ask help from Jinpeng if there are questions on chat, on ChatGPT, I was gonna say, on the chat, on Zoom. Erin, you're paying attention? Okay, are there questions there?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll keep checking there, but questions in the room, Kim?
So you mentioned briefly this astro focused LLM. I'm wondering if like you asked that to make an astro infographic, if like the more specific domain knowledge would like help at all, or do you think it's a
That's
more
interesting. I mean,
fundamental
it was
issue?
built for literature discovery and for, you know, writing things based on the literature. I don't think it's actually connected to a drawing program, but if you did, I mean, that's a really interesting idea. So Bruna, the undergraduate, when the 88P program from NASA still existed, hopefully it still does. We were gonna write another proposal to NASA, and that would be a really good idea for something to include, so. But for now, it's focused entirely on text. And actually, you know, again, there's a funny story as to how I got involved with that, but I'm not that involved, so, but I can tell you that, when it started, which was 2023, it went very fast and it was incredibly good, the Astrolama and Universe TBD, which by the way, it split into two projects. They were eventually one project, original one project. But now, if you just use actual, I mean, you've probably done this, ChatGPT, to search the literature, it's almost as good, if not better. And so I guess it's, you know, from the archive, right? Because the other one could go behind the paywalls. Really amazing.
I'm curious with the infographics, what kind of like prompts you use? Do you give it more so the science and say make an infographic of the science, or would it be better to like go in with an idea of what you want to see and be really specific? Like,
That's a really good question, because one of the times that I was arguing with it and complaining in this sense, I said, how could I help you make better graphics? And again, it was more about art. So it said like, if you want a rabbit in a field in the style of Picasso, first ask me to draw a rabbit, then say to put it in a field, then say to put it in and this must have something to do with how the embeddings are, I don't know how, but anyway, and I tried it, no better, no. And actually, the thing that's interesting is, I wonder, I haven't tried, like, what if I said, make an animation or make a set of stills for 3D dust mapping and show some stars, I'll do it live if you want, you know, show some stars, put in some clouds, make some lines going through. I'll try it if you want, but we'll see if there's other questions, but it probably won't work, is what from my experience, I'm guessing it won't work. Yeah.
Can I follow up? If you ask it to write like the text of what an infographic might look like, does it do a so-so job or?
No. If you ask it to write the text explaining the concept that you're trying to explain visually, it does an amazing job. But if you ask it to make slides, for example, it'll give you a beautiful outline and bulleted list. And then if you'd like to make a picture, the best thing it'll do is write code to make a graph, which we all saw is amazingly good at. And by the way, I'm not saying that the fact that ChatGPT can make decent XY graphs is revolutionary. I'm saying that the fact that it's gone from needing Python, needing a lot of help, to all JavaScript, and would you like this in Plotly or 17 other things, and should I make it 3D in 12 days, is astonishing. Yeah.
There's a question on Zoom.
Yeah, hey Alyssa, nice talk. So just as you were saying, ChatGPT has really come a dramatically quick way, dramatically far in a very short amount of time, going from very structured Python code like you had with Glue to answering unstructured queries, make my plot more fancy. But there is still, to make that functionality happen in ChatGPT, a whole lot of back-end coding that is being added. I was wondering, and that of course actually limits what ChatGPT will ultimately be able to do. I was wondering if you thought that if there was any areas that you thought functionality was just completely lacking. And so there are things ChatGPT still can't do because the human developers of it at these places like OpenAI have missed entire areas of potential research, and whether what you thought about AI improving itself.
Yeah, well, AI improving itself, I mean, everybody thinks that that's happening already. And, yes, Skynet, but let's not go there. And so I think that the two things I said today about 3D selection and infographics are two things that have been missed. In terms of the fact that the 3D selection problem is actually unsolved in computer graphics, like they're in visualization and computer graphics. For the longest time, people in computer science thought it was just thresholding and that there'd always be some surface and it's just a question of getting the segmentation algorithm right. But the thing is, if you think about medical imaging, or if you think about what I study, these sort of amorphous clouds of gas, deciding what you want to do to set a boundary is not obvious, okay? And so you actually want an expert radiologist or an expert astronomer to be setting that boundary. And so they just didn't think about it for a long time. And so there is a company called PassAI. You guys know about this? It's a spin-off from Harvard Medical School where they trained on millions of images of, I think it was breast cancer first, but now I think it's all cancer. And so the PATH stands for pathology. And so you can get these automated segmentations that still, a radiologist will agree with or not, but also will detect cancers that radiologists can't find. But anyway, that's all 2D. So the 3D version of that, Gautam, is not solved. And then, I don't know why, I mean, it could be. But then the other one is this abstraction thing. So in other words, I think there aren't great tools for drawing. I mean, when we all go to try to make, some kind of illustration for a talk or something, especially if you want to do it in 3D, it's like you want to be using Blender, where you're interacting with the code in Blender. And by the way, I've tried some of the AI assistants in like Photoshop and stuff. I must be doing it wrong because they're not very good when I use them. Okay, but I haven't tried that for Blender. Like, I don't know, is there an AI add-on to Blender? Does anybody know? I don't know. Probably, right? Yeah. So stuff like that, although, I mean, those are just two examples, but sort of drawing in 3D, and going back and forth between a description or gestures and what kind of code could be written. But there isn't, you're right, there isn't a lot of code to do that right in the first place. Yeah.
Other question, Chiwa?
Yeah, so tagging on the abstraction question.
Yeah.
Are there developments in the field that is tackle this like more in the algorithmic sense, how AI can actually comprehend things and, well, it's a bit open-ended.
Yeah,
like something fundamentally different than just throwing out.
I mean, my understanding, right, is that a lot of people were just sort of unleashing these black box algorithms, and then there was this whole move, what, 5, 6 years ago, to have the kind of meta level of, let's study what the AI is actually doing. And so I think that that level, which has a name that I'm forgetting what it is, somebody can help me, but the people who are studying how the algorithms behave, essentially. Actually, I think it's called psychology. I think it's called like the psychology of chat bots or something. I mean, there's papers about it. But anyway, that psychology, I think, is not completely understood. And so maybe, you know, that's where we look for why it can or can't do. It's kind of like a child, right? Like a little child is actually, a very small child actually doesn't understand analogies and metaphors. Like that comes later in cognitive development. So it may just take a while. But right now, I mean, I had no idea. It was kind of like when I used Datadesk in 1985, and then everybody's like, "Oh my God, how did you do that?" Because I'd have these plots where I like laugh. It's like, I just used Datadesk, and they're like, "What's Datadesk?" And so I accidentally discovered this thing because I like the Mac, right? And now, because I was trying to make this figure, I accidentally discovered that like this is really bad. And then everybody I talk to in computer science and AI is like, "Yeah, it's really bad." So I think it's not solved. I'm not going to solve it, but I might try to help them.
But there are fields that
Yeah.
are investigating.
Yeah, exactly.
So another hand, tree.
So I'm very curious about the 3D exploration, especially for application in something like cosmological hydro simulations.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if has anyone looked into trying to apply these into cosmological setting?
Yeah.
If not,
Do you
what's
guys
the-
know Scott Lucchini at the CFA? Yeah, do you want to see his simulation on the merge cube? Yeah, okay, it's gonna take a minute. I have to find okay, you're gonna watch me do all of this? You wanna see me find, you can all do it, actually. Hang on, maybe some
Maybe
people
you
wanna
saw
leave.
the name and the.
Yeah, so I can show you the, I think it's an email. Yeah. Am I still sharing my screen?
No,
Well, I will again as soon as I
I
find it.
think no.
Yeah, you are.
Yes, you are.
I am.
Okay.
The problem is I have
don't
to
think
find
so,
the
because
code.
we were seeing.
Not on Zoom. I can't see your screen anymore.
Okay, I'll put it back in a second. I just have to find the email that has this code in it. Not computer code, like a code, like 6 letters. But I have to do this. Can I just not put my email on the screen for just 1 second? Put it right back, okay? For some reason, my computer is like practically dead. Okay. So what you do is, you export from Glue, to a format that can be used for, oh, my computer is so slow. I'm like just searching my email and it's not working. Come on.
Let me see if there was,
Yeah, I can
was
answer
there
that question. while I
another
do-
question?
Here we go. TNG Galaxy, come on. come on.
Yes, Sandy? Let's take another question and then we do this, after we close first.
Sure.
Sandy?
It was related with the final plot that was, obviously overcomplicated for what it is. To me, like that, kind of see, like when you have a very complicated model that is trying to fit, for example, what is usually a linear model. Because the model is already complicated, there is noise also in the data, it's trying to fit all the points. The kernel looks the same to me, it's trying to do something significantly much more complicated than it should.
Yeah,
Because there is no constraint or organization during training. And the question was if if there is some kind of effort on trying to maybe calculate that way, trying to add some kind of constraint or organization to say the model, try to do something less complicated instead of to do something that is obviously a much more high resolution image. Or maybe because ChatGPT is trained to try to produce, artistic image
Right.
mainly.
Right.
It's not able to do that.
no, you're absolutely right. And I mean, that's part of what we tried. So we tried, giving it simpler and simpler and more clear instructions, going back to what you asked. Didn't work. So in other words, it seems to have 2 modes. I'll give you code to make a really boring graph, or I'll make this like super elaborate, crazy thing. So I did get this working, by the way.
Maybe because it's too big, so maybe taking the embeddings of ChatGPT and then having a more specialized small model would work.
I would love to see if somebody can get it to work. So pick,
I mean,
pick your
obviously,
favorite
maybe-
graph.
Mhm.
I don't know, pick your favorite graph.
And try and do
And
it.
then try it.
I don't know for that, but, yeah, I mean, it seems that like the problem is that probably which makes sense, they're trying to take a model that is very complex to do all the things at the same time, and it's not able to focus on this specific thing because it's very specific and very few people are actually doing in the training data.
Yeah,
It would explain why.
Can you fine tune it like more?
No idea.
what did you guys say? Cause I can't hear you.
Like, can you fine tune ChatGPT and train it with your own specific, I know that there's algorithms.
Oh, you can,
Like
yeah, there is a custom, it's called ChatGPTs with an S, and Bruna tried that. Still
And it
didn't work.
didn't work.
Still didn't work.
No, still didn't work.
So we're going back to a demonstration, but you're
Yeah.
not sharing
yeah, yeah.
on Zoom
I'll fix that. I'll
for
fix
people
that.
to see. And then we have a question from Zoom as well.
Okay.
And that will be the last two things we're gonna do.
Okay, this
before we
one's gonna be
close.
amazing, 'cause it's like 9 levels of complication
Okay,
here.
so now
Let's
you're
see.
sharing, you're
Alright,
sharing
now-
on Zoom.
Now I have to, oops, whoops, bad. I have to go back here and then share my screen of my phone on my laptop.
If I can ask some quiet,
Alright. So now,
yes, people can see on Zoom as well.
okay, there you go. So can you guys see that that's a galaxy?
Oh, wow.
Okay, it looks, it loses a lot by the time it gets to there, but it's pretty good here, so yeah, so I've turned this cube into a cutout from one of the illustrious TNG simulations. And so then you can see now why, if I had a third hand, it would be really helpful. So I could reach into that cube, right, and select what I want, okay? So in other words, I can see this really well, here, and I can get a really good kind of gestalt sense for what's going on. Yeah,
Can you actually interact with the image or is it just like posted on the cube?
in the Apple Vision Pro, you can.
Okay.
Here, there are ways that you can make stuff you can tap on and you can, but we've sort of given up on that because it's very hard. Not as very hard to do. It's pretty easy to do. It's very hard to use.
Yeah.
But actually, it turns out that what this is really for, like where these came from, is an educational app. And so I can show you just quickly, because this usually does work on the first try. So we're partnered with this company called Merge. They're very nice to us. Their business model is to sell this educational stuff, to sell these subscriptions to schools, which seems, I don't really want to be making money off of schools, but that is how they do. And so if I put this here, you can see, here's an animated solar system, and I could show you an animated Radcliffe wave, but this is better. You can see that you can also use it as an anchor, and it goes outside of the cube.
Hmm.
Okay, and in this one, see, I touched it and something happened, and now it says the sun. And I see, I can't even, like, I'm trying to, very small, okay, but I can have like little tags, and so yes, you can interact with it, but people only have 2 hands. So it's really, it gets a little hard, but you can also do stuff, like if I do this, I can say, just put it on the table. And then I can close that now, just go back and do it again. And I can do the same thing with our data, but since I have this open, just do it like this. So now, if I walk around this, okay, it's anchored to the table. And now it's easier. I can do stuff here, and I can touch things, and I can change things.
So it's not even attached to the cube anymore then, right?
Sorry?
It's not even attached to the cube.
No, it's on the
No,
table.
you can attach it to
Oh, I see,
anything.
I
So
see, I
this
see.
is just, all this is, looks really cool, but all it is the different patterns on the
Yeah.
different sides of the cube so that it can track it very easily. Here, it's still there. It just tracked the environment.
Yeah.
But this is, trust me, if you really want to look at complicated data, it's much better. And so, yeah, I have a stand on my desk that I can put the phone in.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know how many of you know Charlie Latta, the astronomer, but he's
Yeah.
like the most Luddite in his own words. But when he saw this and he saw molecular clouds and this, he's like, where can I get that? Amazon, it's okay. So in other words, I think everybody has a phone. This is $20. You could make branded ones that say SkAI and get them out.
We're educating. Okay, one last question on Zoom. Where was it? You think?
Yeah, it's me. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Goodman. That's a really good demo. I like it. And also thank you for the talk. It's very informative and clear. So I've kind of two questions. And sorry if it's taking long. And one of them is more on making visualization using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So looks like ChatGPT is not really good at making visualization, having words in them. Can we actually pushing further on asking LM to generate code to make visualization? For example, Cloud is very good at making codes, and can we actually pushing from that direction further?
Yeah, so Claude is one of the things that Bruna tried, and those plots that I showed you in her paper, I don't remember whether they were from Claude or something else, but they look like that. So it makes, matplotlib kind of code, which does not make, for the XY graphs, that is how that was made. In other words, that was code generated by ChatGPT. But the reason I said infographics is because that's this kind of mixture of drawing and data. And that's harder. And so that's what it's bad at.
Right. And my question is actually then follow up on that. I was wondering whether it's possible it's also that it's lacking some sort of multimodality possibility and also lack of domain knowledge in astronomy. And if we want to build a foundation model like Astrolama, we probably want to blend in more multimodality. How can we actually go from that direction?
I would love to know. Remember when I said this wasn't a very technical talk? You're gonna exceed my technical depth very soon. So in other words, I'm right at the borderline of creator and user. I'm not that far into the creator zone. So I know what you mean by multimodality, but I don't know of examples of anything that really has to do with infographics. So we tried, like I said, she tried using this chat GPTs to do it herself. We are in the proposal we were gonna write, which hopefully we'll still write. The idea is to say, what if, exactly what you're asking, what if we train this on some corpus of actual astronomy graphics, which beautifully come out of that reading time machine thing I told you about, and the ADS All-Sky survey, which was previously funded by the NASA ADAP. So they were totally gonna pay for this. So they would just announce the call for proposals. I'll let you know in a few years.
Great, thank you.
You got it.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Vicky,
You have anything?
Alyssa, I just wanted to thank you really quickly. I couldn't help but notice on your ChatGPT screen that one of your topics for discussion was Alyssa Goodman's obituary. I wanted to perish that thought and just thank you for some of the most lively discussion we've had in SkAI instead of anything connected with obituaries.
You saw that, that's so funny. It's like when you see people browser tab. No, the reason that was there is because Kelsey Johnson, some of you know her, she was visiting me last week and she's written a fantastic book that you should all read called Into the Unknown. And it's about sort of what we can and cannot and may or may not know in science. But anyway, so she was asking me about ChatGPT and she's like, didn't you ever do your own obituary? I'm like, I've never.
No, never.
Anyway, so she made me do that. And you can check it.
Now everybody will be doing this.
It's better than if you ask it for your biography, because you're still alive and they're not trying to butter you up, but when you're dead, it's like, oh my God, she was so great. It's sad that she's dead. But thanks,
Well, on this note,
I'm gonna tell Kelsey. Okay.
thank you, everybody, all the attendees, but most importantly, thank you, Alyssa, for joining us and for a wonderful talk. Her schedule is full, but I'm sure everybody who will meet her later will enjoy. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Making it from where I was.